Chapter 13 The Dream, Part 1. Mud splashed against Twilight's hooves as she charged through the rain-slogged paths of Ponyville. She flinched as a powerful gust of wind blew the hood of her poncho away, clearing the path for heavy drops of rain to splash against her muzzle. She was quick to pull the hood back into place. It had been raining for days, rain unlike anything any pony had experienced before. The weather ponies didn't know what was happening, and every attempt to stop it had only led to failure and injury. The rain came down in vicious lashes, driven on by the wind, making it impossible to see anything but vague shapes more than a dozen meters away. Now, the streets of Ponyville were nearly empty, most of the population having evacuated for the mountain. A few stragglers hurried past, heads down, saddlebags full to bursting and protected with knotted tarps. They were out of sight in seconds, leaving Twilight alone once again, like ghosts crossing paths in the fog of the afterlife. Twilight splashed through the entrance to Sweet Apple Acres, grimacing as the rushing water threatened to pull her from her hooves and down into the farm's many fresh-drowned valleys. She didn't understand what was happening. No pony did. The first guess had been some kind of expansion from the Everfree, but the strange rain clouds had showed up across Equestria simultaneously without any point of origin. Twilight could find no sign of Discord's magic being responsible. The Draconicus and his stone prison had been missing altogether when she traveled to Canterlot to check on them. A torrential rain of simple water seemed counter to his style anyways, and he hadn't showed up to gloat. Twilight suspected that there was some new, yet unknown force at play, and she knew that it was up to her and her friends to find out what. A gust of wind slammed into her side as she approached the Apple family barn and pushed her over. She yelped, flailing her hooves as she lost her balance and was swept along by the current. With a burst of magic, she increased her weight, using the extra stability to regain her senses and climb to her hooves. She grit her teeth and plodded towards the barn one determined step at a time. At last, she made it to the barn door.
Girls!
She called, struggling to be heard over the storm.
It's me! Let me in!
The creak of the double door's top half opening was barely audible over the pelting of the rain. A single light blue eye peeked through the crack.
Twilight? Fluttershy!
Twilight flinched as a sheet of rain smacked into her muzzle.
Open the door!
Slowly, Fluttershy shook her head.
I can't do that, Twilight. There's monsters outside. What?
Twilight sputtered. She glanced behind her in search of some sort of creature, but all she saw was the rain and rising water. Her eyes shot open in alarm as she realized that the water was already lapping at her belly.
But we're on a hill.
If the water was so high here, didn't that mean the rest of Ponyville?
Fluttershy, please!
Twilight banged a hoof on the door.
Let me in! I'm scared of you, Twilight,
Fluttershy said.
You're a monster. No!
Tears of panic were lost in the rain on Twilight's cheeks. Her world had been reduced to Fluttershy, the barn, and an endless expanse of rising water that surrounded them.
Something's happening to you! Hang on, Fluttershy!
Was it the unknown enemy that had started the rain? Maybe some kind of hypnosis akin to what Discord had used on her and her friends?
A memory spell! If I can just get her to remember who she is!
A deep roaring pulled Twilight out of her thoughts. She looked to the side, jaw dropping open at the sight of the massive wave hurtling towards them. There was no way they would survive the impact. She had to get her friends out, now!
Fluttershy, look at me!
Twilight turned back to the barn, horn glowing with arcane energy. Fluttershy eyed her uncertainly, shrinking back.
You scare me, Twilight. I can't let you in.
The quiet creak of the door closing was somehow louder in Twilight's ears than the pelting rain and the roaring wave alike.
No!
Twilight reared up, wedging a hoof into the door and trying to look past Fluttershy.
Let me in! Girls! This isn't you!
Her heart was pounding. The shadow of the wave passed over her, plunging her into a darkness even deeper than the storm that had blocked the sun for days.
I don't have time for this!
She cast a powerful weight spell on herself, grunting as her legs strained to carry the extra load. The purple glow of a shield lit the barn as she wrapped it in her arcane protection. The wave crashed into her shield with a force unlike any she had felt before, forcing her to pour even more energy into it. She could feel her reserves plummeting. She had to be fast. She locked eyes with Fluttershy and strained to form the memory spell as she maintained her shield spell and weight spell.
Twilight?
Fluttershy flinched away.
What are you doing? Trust me, Fluttershy!
Twilight hissed through clenched teeth.
Look at me! There!
She had it. The memory spell was ready. Now to just... The wave roared at her. Actually screamed in fury as it redoubled its assault. Twilight cried out in pain as her shield broke, leaving the barn at the mercy of the endless torrent of water. She was sent tumbling through the world, catching brief glimpses of the barn being torn to pieces by the water. The feedback from the broken spell raced up her horn, forcing the memory spell out of her. Without a target, it doubled back onto its caster, the little spark of light twisting to strike Twilight square in the forehead. In that instant, she was aware. She wasn't in Ponyville. There was no endless rain or sinister wave. The world had already drowned, and she lay asleep at the bottom of the ocean. It was all an illusion. Yet something was stopping her from waking up, a mental wall keeping her pinned in the realm of dreams with a massive will she could never hope to compete against. The wave roared at her once more. She was deep beneath the surface now, floating in pitch black. Twisting around, she saw a pair of dark eyes watching her, blacker even than the darkness, framed by wisps of purple and blood-red tears. She stared at it defiantly, horn glowing with renewed purpose. Twilight had some experience with lucid dreaming, and she would not allow this creature to manipulate her without resistance. With a thought, the water was gone. Twilight stood in the plains outside of Ponyville on a sunny day, a gentle wind playing with her mane. She glared at the lithe, scarred, equine being that had attempted to trap her in a nightmare, calling up what she had learned on memories and dreams from long talks with Princess Luna.
What are you?
Twilight demanded. The monster didn't respond. It watched her silently, terrifying hunger lingering within its bloodshot eyes. Blood oozed freely from the wounds marring its patchy furred skin, dripping onto the crisp grass below. Twilight advanced on it, the world shaking with every step.
This is my dream!
She shouted.
My domain! Do you think you can challenge me here?
There was rage burning inside her, alien and overpowering. She felt so alive. Wings of vibrant purple energy sprouted at her sides, beating at the air.
If you won't let me wake up, I'll tear you to pieces!
Chunks of earth erupted from the ground as Twilight shot up into the air. She gathered a sparkling ball of magic over her horn, the black-laced purple casting a dark shadow over her grin. She unleashed it without focus or finesse, a beam of raw power hurtling towards the monster with all the thought of a raging river. The monster didn't move. A blinding flash of light and a thunderous roar washed over Twilight as the beam struck home. When she opened her eyes, she saw the monster hovering calmly above a massive crater borne on wings of blood. Twilight screamed, throwing a ball of raw magic at the beast. It dodged to the side, a long tongue darting out to lick at its lips. Twilight didn't let up. She unleashed a barrage of arcane bullets, bombs, and beams in a number she didn't even bother to count. The world shook with the impacts. The earth shattered beneath her. The light of the detonations drowned out the sun, and still the monster darted around her attacks, always watching with that leering hunger.
Die! Die! Die!
Twilight laughed.
Why won't you die?
Thunder rumbled in the distance as her furious assault came to an end. She was flying high above the cracked earth, chest heaving. She had lost track of her target.
Where did it go?
She scanned the smoldering horizon with an eager grin, horn already primed to channel even more raw magic. Twilight's grin faltered. It twisted into a horrified gape as she took in the dream Equestria around her. The world had been transformed into an ashen hellscape by her madness. Rivers of magma flowed through charred cracks, outlined by the flaming corpses of trees. The once blue sky was now gray and dead, overcome by the tons of ash and dust kicked up with each explosion. The wooden and thatch homes of Ponyville were little more than scattered sticks, the town unrecognizable, except for the ruins of the sturdier town center.
I did this,
she murmured. A cold emptiness formed in her stomach.
How could I? No!
She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head.
It's just a dream. It's not real. I would never.
Opening her eyes, Twilight found herself eye to eye with the grinning monster. For a brief instant, her wide stare met its voracious gaze, and then something dark and red flashed beneath her. Twilight yelped in alarm as the sudden strike caused her to tumble wildly upwards. Equestria flew past her vision, and again, over and over as she rocketed towards the clouds. She grit her teeth as she tried to angle her wings and balance herself out. She had no experience with flight in the waking world, but Twilight had a great deal of experience lucid dreaming about herself being a princess, and a firm grasp of aerodynamics. She caught the air on her wings, screwing her nose up in concentration as she leveled herself out just beneath the ashen clouds. Magic gathered on the tip of her horn as she tracked the monster racing after her, the anger stirring in her chest once more.
No!
The black and purple orb fizzled out as she forced the magic to disperse. The rage had taken her over, turned her into a monster that would destroy Equestria on a whim. She would not lose herself to it again. She had to be calm, think things through. Raw power clearly wasn't working on this beast. She raced through the list of spells she knew off hoof, looking for... The monster struck her during her hesitation, connecting with a sharp crack. Twilight grunted in shock as she shot through the clouds above like a bullet and came out the other side with a resounding boom. Her wings were gone. She reached with her mind to pull at the fabric of the dream, but it slipped away from her like a taunting child. She wasn't in her own dream anymore. She was falling towards an island floating in the sky, its surface pockmarked with craters and scarred with trenches. In brief glimpses, she saw explosions erupting from each side of the island as massive cannons exchanged fire. Pillars of smoke rose towards an ashen sky from the burning rubble of a town in the middle of it all, carrying with them the acrid stench of death. Where had the monster taken her? It had to be someone else's dream, as she was lucid but lacked any control over the dream's reality. Had it gotten to somebody else? Her friends? There wasn't time to consider the question at length. She needed to recover before the monster wrestled her mind back into submission. The wind stung at her eyes as she hurtled through clouds of black smoke, a fresh spell on her mind, one she had cast many times. So often, she thought with a small smirk, that she could cast it even in her sleep. She cast the cloud walking spell quick and clean, feeling the familiar tingle pass through her body. It wasn't even a second later that she slapped into the edge of a cloud, bouncing off like a pinball as the breath was driven from her lungs. There was a moment of weightlessness, and then a thud. She tumbled through the soft cloud stuff, coughing up smoke as she finally rolled to a stomp on her side. Twilight bounced back to her hooves, racing to regain her senses. She was standing on the spiraling surface of an acrid black pillar of smoke, high above the battle raging below. Looking up, she saw the monster rushing down at her with a foreleg extended, fangs bared in an eager grimace. Twilight leapt to the side, the wake of the monster passing, throwing her off balance as it punched through the smoke cloud where she had been standing an instant before. She rolled back to her hooves, a plan taking shape in her thoughts. She had no power here, but... Twilight grunted as the monster struck her from below, rising up out of the smoke between her hooves. She flew through the air, gasping for breath, and crashed into a dirty gray cloud some distance below.
Should be more careful,
she thought, pulling herself to her hooves.
Clouds don't give much protection.
The monster was already coming for her again, a bloodied arrow streaking through the ashen sky. With a burst of magic, Twilight teleported away, reappearing on another cloud. From cloud to cloud she went, working her way down to the surface, trying to recall everything she could about her talks with Luna. Dream creatures were difficult to deal with. They were ideas given purpose, feelings given thought. To kill one was a personal and involved process requiring a great investment of time studying its nature, even for the most seasoned dreamwalker. The best a pony like Twilight could do was trap them somewhere they could do no harm. She knew that Princess Luna personally had trapped many powerful creatures in her mind, keeping them contained until she knew enough of their natures to defeat them for good, but Twilight didn't think that was an option for her. Another flash of purple, and Twilight found herself on a half-collapsed rooftop in a battle-torn town. She formed a small shield of her magic, angling it to intercept the spear of blood that the monster had thrown at her. She flinched as the attack bounced away, shattering her shield in the process before turning tail to run once more. It couldn't hurt her in the dream. Not physically, at least. The mind might reel if it thought it had just fallen to its death, but it would always recover to find the body whole. The danger was in what the creature might do to her in that brief interlude between perceived damage and realization. It could drag her away to lock her in a nightmare of her own creation, or consume her subconscious to sustain itself. Likewise, Twilight had no way to fight it outside of her own dreams. She had to find this dream's host. Until then, she would stall. Twilight jumped over an alleyway illuminated by the flickering light of gunfire. The monster burst up through the roof in front of her, maw stretched unnaturally wide. Twilight's eyes widened in alarm as she rushed to teleport away. There hadn't been time to find a target for the spell. She found herself floating mid-air above a collapsed roof. A shocked scream escaped her as she fell onto the rubble, bouncing off with a strangled grunt. She hit a window, cracking it with the force of the impact, and fell face down into the street. She groaned as she picked herself up. Gunfire rattled in the distance. The monster was relentless now that she was vulnerable. She had to find the host fast or she might not get another chance. She took a quick glance around, seeing no glimpse of the monster. A trio of huge bullets soared over the street, shaking loose the rubble piled around the street as they struck home somewhere out of sight. Her gaze focused in on a tall building made of stone, scratches of faded blue and purple paint still visible on its cracked walls. A single stained glass window remained whole, depicting a scuffed Princess Luna smiling down at the world. The building stood out, both in color and detail. Where other structures were little more than dim-colored boxes lined up in neat rows, the church and the surrounding park were distinct.
The dream's host must be over there.
The harsh crack of gunfire grew louder in Twilight's ears as she galloped for the church. Looking through one of the windows, she teleported herself inside and onto the surviving half of the wooden mezzanine that looked down onto the church interior. The ponies inside the church were the image of controlled chaos. Soldiers in varying levels of armor scurried about the rear, firing the repeaters mounted on their sides at an endless horde of faceless, gray-furred ponies. The faceless all wore the same light armor and carried the same guns, taking ground with robotic determination as they advanced on the furniture barricade the defenders were using as cover. Twilight raised a hoof to her muzzle, shocked by the display of violence. The faceless simply disappeared in puffs of ash when they were struck down, but the ponies defending the barricade were not so lucky. Their shouts of anger, pain, and fear filled the church with a dread chorus as the fight wavered out of their favor. Bodies were strewn over the floor in grotesque detail, the blood running in miniature rivers to pool at the back of the room. A familiar voice shook Twilight from her daze. Following the sound with her eyes, she saw Sabre crouched down behind the very center of the barricade. The Pegasus looked younger, though no less stern, and instead of her dive suit, she wore a much less encumbering set of plate segments and a helmet. As Twilight watched, she vaulted over the barricade, a blade attached to each wing, and cut down a trio of faceless before rolling back into cover.
"Flint!"
she heard Sabre shout.
"I need you, now!"
"Roger that, boss!" Flint shouted. Twilight followed his voice just in time to see him stand up from behind an altar adorned with moon and star motifs. He grunted as he heaved a gun the size of his chest onto the altar, pointed all three of its barrels at the church's front door, and pulled back the bolt on its side. "Suppress and fire!" He gripped the trigger bit in his jaw and unleashed a barrage of rounds, laughing into the bit all the while. It couldn't be coincidence, Twilight decided. Either Flint or Sabre had to be the host of this dream. Perhaps even both of them shared it, trapped in the memory of an old battle. Was this why Flint hadn't responded on the radio earlier? Had Sabre already followed Twilight in and succumbed to the monster's sleeping trance? As if on cue, the monster chose that moment to catch up. It crashed in through the roof, raining chunks of stone and splashes of blood on the ponies below. A chorus of alarmed shouts rang up among the soldiers, some cut short by falling rubble. The faceless all vanished in a puff of smoke as the soldiers adjusted their focus, lighting the monster up with their tracers. "What the hell is that thing?" some pony asked.
"It doesn't matter,"
Sabre barked.
"Focus fire!"
The soldiers would never stand a chance. Figments of the imagination couldn't hope to fight back against a creature of dreams. They were barely even a speed bump. Twilight teleported down onto the church floor, appearing in front of Sabre before she could leap into the fray.
"See, Sabre!" "What?"
Sabre paused, frowning at the mare that had flashed into being before her.
"Get out of the way! That thing will kill you! You're dreaming!"
Twilight said, grabbing the other mare's shoulder.
"Look around you! Where are the soldiers you were just fighting? How did you get here? Step aside, civilian!"
Sabre grabbed Twilight's hoof and twisted it, tossing her unceremoniously to the floor. She beat her wings, racing towards the monster. Twilight kicked up a thick cloud of dust as she hit the floor. She coughed, scrambling back to her hooves as a trio of soldiers crouched near her were cut down by a blade of floating blood. She looked up to the monster just in time to see it lunge for Sabre. The Pegasus let out a wet grunt as a tendril of blood punched through her chest barding, coming out the other side before tossing her away. "Sabre!" Flint dropped his weapon, rushing to his commander's side. Twilight was close behind him.
We can't beat it.
Sabre coughed up blood, her eyes darting from one scene of carnage to another. She turned to focus on Flint.
Get the Team out, soldier!
Flint, you're dreaming.
Twilight said, erecting a barrier around the trio.
Think about it. Where are we? How long have we been here?
Dreaming my ass, Flint growled. He bent down, shoving Sabre onto his back as he rose his voice. We're falling back, ponies! Protect the boss! The shouts of affirmation were worryingly sparse. There wasn't even a dozen ponies left in the squad. Twilight flinched as a spray of fresh blood splashed against the shield right in front of her face. They had to get away fast, but the church didn't lend them many options. If she was in her own dream, she would have just imagined up an escape route, but that wasn't an option.
Unless... Flint!
Twilight said, struggling to put as much command into her voice as she could.
Let's leave through the tunnel. We can seal it behind us.
Good idea, Twilight. He turned to the last living dregs of the squad as they fell back from the monster. Come on, you bastards! He yelled hoarsely. You want to leave me all alone? Any response was interrupted by a thick stream of blood vomited by the monster as it flew past. The blood was boiling hot, steam rising to mist the air. The last survivor screamed as the thick fluid clung to their armor, cooking them alive. Damn it! Flint cursed. Fuck it all!
Flint,
Sabre said, voice faint.
the tunnel.
Still cursing, Flint turned and kicked a rug away with a hoof. Twilight was certain that the rug hadn't been there before, nor the trap door hidden beneath it. She reinforced her shield as the monster flew full force into it, sending a painful jolt of feedback up Twilight's horn. Cracks spiderwebbed around the impact before it burst into glowing purple shards.
Hurry!
Twilight yelled. She yelped in alarm as she felt her hind leg being tugged behind her. Get in! Flint shouted. Stars sprouted in Twilight's side as her head knocked against something hard. She heard the wooden thunk of the trapdoor closing and felt Flint hastily pulling her along. There was a deep rumble and the sting of stone fragments against her side. Then silence. When Twilight's vision cleared, it was so dark that at first she wondered if she had gone blind. A trickle of magic proved otherwise as the purple glow of her horn illuminated a cramped stone tunnel. Sabre was leaning against the rocky wall, wheezing with every breath and cradling the wound in her chest. Flint stood solemnly in the center of the tunnel, looking into the darkness behind them. Is this it? He asked. Twilight looked behind her uncertainly. Heavy rocks blocked the path back to the church.
It looks like it.
Flint stomped a hoof against the ground, letting out a fearsome roar that held just as much sorrow as it did anger. What the fuck was that? Twilight frowned. She didn't feel like Flint would be open to explanations about dreams or illusions at the moment. The fact that Twilight's escape plan had worked and Flint had recognized her showed that he was the host of the dream, and that gave him power that she did not want to antagonize.
I don't know.
The squad,
Sabre murmured, looking up. She paused to take a breath.
survivors.
It's just us, boss, Flint said. He pivoted, bucking the wall hard enough to chip the stone. It's just fucking us! Sabre closed her eyes. She shook her head slowly.
We should keep moving.
Keep moving where? Flint demanded. The so-called tunnel's a fucking dead end! Just like that damn church! Twilight cleared her throat.
No, it isn't. The tunnel leads to someplace safe.
Oh, is that so, smartass? Flint asked. He stepped to the side of the tunnel, gesturing with a hoof. Then be my fucking guest. Twilight grimaced. She had been hoping that he would just believe her and, in doing so, make her right. Why hadn't he done that this time? She stepped past him gingerly, brightening her horn. The glow came to rest on a smooth wall of black brick and blue mortar that very cleanly blocked any path forwards. Twilight raised a hoof and pressed it over the wall. It was cold to the touch.
What is this?
She asked.
Was this here before?
Hell if I know, Flint grumbled. Let's just settle in and wait for the end already. Twilight pursed her lips. She'd seen a wall like this before, she was certain. It was a distant memory plucking at the edge of her thoughts. She remembered talking with Princess Luna, walking with her in a dream. They spoke of mental barriers to keep out the unwanted and ways to pierce them. Then they had played a game where Luna let Twilight attempt to pierce her own mental walls. Twilight had failed utterly, of course. Princess Luna was a dreamwalker of quite literally inconceivable skill compared to every other equestrian. The wall before her, made of obsidian and with signs of the finest craftsmanship, was one of Princess Luna's very own mental barriers. There was no doubt in Twilight's mind. But what was it doing here? A deep rumble shook the tunnel. Pebbles and dust rained down on the three ponies as the earth settled. The thing's still coming for us, Flint growled. If we survive this, I might just start going to church. Sabre stirred, sitting up a little straighter and mumbling,
Flint. Firing line.
Before slumping over once more. Yeah, boss, Flint said. He didn't move.
We can get out this way,
Twilight said. Her horn glowed as she pulled a spell from the depths of her memory. It felt foreign to her mind. It was dream magic, which followed only the laws of lawless dreams. It was an entirely different beast from her usual fare, but Twilight's memory didn't fail her. A small orb of glittering starlight arced out of her horn and alighted in the center of the wall. The starlight brightened and stretched, taking on the form of an ornate door before dimming to the same polished obsidian of the rest of the wall. Flint grunted. Where does it go? Twilight opened the door with a huff, revealing a shimmering field of shadows.
Out of here,
she said.
And if I can guide us through, somewhere safe. Bite my tail.
What? Flint asked, shouldering Sabre's weight once more. Why?
It's hard to explain,
Twilight said.
Especially to someone that doesn't know they're dreaming. It's easy to get lost. If we get separated, we might not see each other again.
Well, fuck, I got some rope for that. Flint twisted his neck back, pulling a length of rope out of his saddlebags and dropping it on the ground between them. Twilight blinked.
Oh, that works too, actually.
Her horn glowed as she tied the rope around both of their barrels and knotted it securely. She didn't give it much slack. The tunnel shook around them again, rumbling louder than before.
Follow me. Stay close.
A cool breeze blew over Twilight as she crossed the threshold. Walls of obsidian brick outlined a narrow hallway just wide enough for two mares to walk abreast. Pale light came from the polished floor beneath her hooves, where the night sky shone upwards in a cloudless night. The hallway stretched forward several more paces before branching off in two directions. Where the fuck? Flint mumbled, looking around behind her. How did I get here? Where's my dive suit, Twilight? He cocked his head as if speaking into his radio. Boss, you hearing me?
What's the last thing you remember, Flint?
Twilight asked, leading him down the left branch of the trail. She looked back and saw that Sabre was nowhere to be seen. Just a very confused Flint. We were on a dive, he said. The starlight shining from below cast a ghostly shadow over his eyes. You said you felt something, so we were going through some rubble. And then... how did we get here?
We're dreaming.
Twilight said.
There's a monster chasing us, a creature of dreams, and we just left your dream.
She paused as a gentle grinding sound came from the hall ahead of her. The hall angled upwards, sprouting star-speckled stairs. Uh-huh. The pair trotted in silence for a few seconds before Flint added, "And where are we now, then?"
Princess Luna's labyrinth.
Twilight explained.
If we can get through this, we'll be able to enter her dream.
A hesitant smile crept onto her face. "You know what?" Flint said. "I don't know what we're doing, what I'm doing, but it seems like you have some idea. Just tell me what to do and you can tell me the details later." They turned a corner, the entrance coming into view. The open obsidian door waited patiently in front of them, the dark tunnel in Flint's dream waiting on the other side. Weren't we just here?" Flint asked. Twilight nodded.
That's right.
They had walked in a mostly straight line, without passing any other hallways. Twilight was very glad that she'd had some experience with Luna's labyrinth before.
Now we turn around.
Twilight turned to see an even more confused Flint. "Oh, but..." He looked behind him, his sentence falling short. "But we were just..." The very same forked path that had greeted them when they first entered the labyrinth waited ahead of them. Twilight squeezed past the burly stallion, saying,
This is going to be really confusing, Flint. You'll just have to trust me.
She started for the left branch again. "We already went this way, little mare," Flint growled. "We should take the right path."
Trust me,
Twilight said. She glanced down at the night sky as she walked, checking to see if it had shifted. She was surprised the stars hadn't started moving already. They had been twisting and turning almost constantly when she had tried navigating the labyrinth in the past. Again, they waited for the hall to raise into a stairway, and again they followed the same straight, unbranching path that somehow led them back to the entrance. Flint grumbled, but otherwise remained silent as Twilight once again led him down the left path, up the stairs, and straight to the entrance. This time, however, Twilight led the duo down the right branch.
the path less traveled.
She thought. It had taken her 2 days just to get past the first branch of the labyrinth in the past.
Luna's first puzzle.
If Twilight had gone this way before, it would have led straight back to the entrance. Both branches did, until one was taken 3 times more than the other. Only then would the path less traveled lead deeper into the maze. Or at least, it would if Luna's defenses had remained the same, since the last time Twilight tested them, so many centuries ago. Twilight breathed a sigh of relief as the hall opened up into a wide circular chamber. Trails of night sky arched across its center and traced elaborate routes over the walls, illuminating the obsidian walls with their twinkling light.